Sarah had always prided herself on her relationship with James and his family. She loved him with all her heart, and she had worked hard to fit into his world. His mother, Linda, was a little more difficult to connect with, but Sarah had done her best to stay friendly and polite. It wasn't that Linda was rude. She just had a way of being overly protective of James, and sometimes her words felt like thinly veiled criticism. Still, Sarah always believed it was just the way mothers were, especially when it came to their sons. She had never let it bother her too much, thinking that one day things would get easier. One quiet afternoon, Sarah was cleaning the living room. It was a simple, peaceful task, just picking up, dusting the shelves, and making sure everything was in its place. James and his mother were in the kitchen, chatting away, their voices carrying into the living room. Sarah wasn't eavesdropping on purpose, but as she moved around, she couldn't help but overhear their conversation. At first, it was nothing unusual, just small talk about the weather, the house, and family events. But then, out of nowhere, Sarah heard something that made her stop in her tracks. Linda's voice, a little quieter now, said something that cut through the air. "You know, I've never really thought James was good enough for her. I always thought she deserved someone better." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She froze, her hand still holding the dust cloth, the words echoing in her mind. Was this really happening? Was Linda really saying this about her son, and worse, about Sarah? The words seemed to hang in the air like an uninvited guest at a dinner party. For a moment, Sarah didn't know what to do. Should she interrupt? Should she confront Linda right now? But no. She stayed still, her mind racing, unsure what to believe. Sarah stood frozen, the dust cloth slipping from her fingers as Linda's words continued to echo in her mind. She tried to convince herself it was just a careless comment, maybe even a misunderstanding. But the more she listened, the clearer it became that Linda's thoughts about her marriage were far more complicated than Sarah had ever imagined. "You know," Linda's voice softened again, as if she was telling James a secret, "I never understood why he married Sarah in the first place. He's always been too soft for her. She deserves someone stronger, someone who can really support her, not someone like him." Sarah felt her chest tighten. She stood there, unable to move, barely breathing. Linda's words weren't just casual complaints. They were deep-rooted beliefs. Someone stronger? Not someone like him? These thoughts were much darker than the occasional disapproving glance or pointed comment Linda usually made. This wasn't just about her. It was about James, too. It was as if the ground beneath her feet was crumbling. Sarah had always known that Linda didn't exactly love her the way she loved her own family, but she had never heard her say anything so harsh. Did James know how his mother really felt? Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. She had always tried to get along with Linda, to show her that she cared about James and their life together. She had done everything she thought was right, supporting James through his career changes, planning family holidays, always showing up for Linda's birthday celebrations. But now, it seemed all those efforts had been in vain. Linda had always been polite to her face, but behind her back, Sarah had been nothing more than a source of disappointment. The next words from Linda were like a sharp punch to Sarah's gut. "I know James isn't perfect," she said with a small sigh. "But if only he could be more like his father, strong, in charge. It's just not in him, though. He's too gentle, too soft-hearted. And it doesn't help that Sarah expects him to be someone he's not." Sarah could feel the tears welling up in her eyes, but she fought them back. She didn't want Linda or James to see how deeply her heart had been wounded. The last thing she wanted was for anyone to think she was weak, but right now, her emotions felt out of control. She could hear James responding to his mother, his voice low, but she couldn't make out the words. Was he defending her? Did he even realize how cruel his mother's words were? Or had he heard them all before and just ignored them for the sake of family peace? With shaking hands, Sarah grabbed her dust cloth, trying to distract herself from the anger and confusion swirling inside her. She moved from the living room to the kitchen, trying to steady her breathing, but the knot in her stomach wouldn't loosen. When she reached the kitchen doorway, James was just standing there, looking at Linda with an expression she couldn't read. Linda glanced up at Sarah and quickly smiled, as if nothing had happened. But Sarah couldn't forget the words she'd heard. She couldn't just pretend like everything was fine. As much as she tried to swallow down the hurt, it kept bubbling back up. Why hadn't James ever told her this? Why did Linda feel so comfortable saying these things? Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of everything. She had always thought their marriage was built on honesty, that they shared everything, good and bad. But now, she wasn't sure what was real anymore. Did James know how his mother felt about him? Had he ever cared enough to tell Sarah? As Sarah's thoughts spiraled, she realized she had two choices: confront James about what she'd heard or keep silent and pretend nothing was wrong. But silence no longer felt like an option. The truth had been exposed, and there was no going back. The house felt different now. Quiet. Heavy. Sarah couldn't shake the words that kept echoing in her mind. He's too soft for her. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get them out of her head. Every time she passed the living room, she could still hear Linda's voice as clearly as if it had just been spoken. She walked into their bedroom, her heart pounding. The words had completely shifted the way she saw her life, her marriage, her relationship with Linda. The more she thought about it, the more she realized there had always been subtle signs, little things she had brushed aside or ignored. Now, in the quiet of their room, everything seemed to make sense in a way it never had before. There had always been tension between her and Linda, but it had always been so quiet. Little passive-aggressive comments here and there. Snide remarks about her cooking or the way she organized their home. It was never outright criticism, just enough to make Sarah feel like she wasn't quite good enough. But she'd always brushed it off, telling herself that Linda was just being protective of James, that she didn't really mean to hurt her. Then there were the moments when James had seemed distant or unwilling to stand up for her. There were times when Linda would make a cutting remark, and James would either laugh it off or change the subject. Sarah had tried to understand, to convince herself that maybe he didn't want to cause drama, that he didn't want to upset his mother. But now, everything felt different. It wasn't just about avoiding arguments. It felt like James had been hiding something from her all along. Had he always known how his mother really felt? Sarah wondered. How many times had Linda made these comments, and James had just sat there, saying nothing? Sarah felt a sense of betrayal rising in her chest. She thought their marriage was built on trust, on honesty, but now she wasn't sure where she stood. She thought back to their wedding day, when she had felt so full of hope and love. It had been a beautiful day, and James had promised to love her through thick and thin, to face whatever came their way. But now, as she replayed those memories, she wondered, did he mean those words? Or was he just saying what he thought she wanted to hear? And what about Linda? Sarah had always tried to make an effort with her, to get along and show her that she cared about her son. She'd always done everything she thought was right, celebrating birthdays, calling to check in, and trying to be a part of their family. Yet, Linda had never fully accepted her. Every time they had a conversation, it felt like there was an invisible wall between them. The more Sarah reflected, the more the cracks in her understanding grew. Linda's words had peeled away the thin layer of politeness that had hidden the truth. Sarah had been blind to the real dynamics of their marriage and family, unable to see how deeply James had been affected by his mother's disapproval. She had believed that time and love would change things, that one day Linda would see how much Sarah cared for James. But now, it felt like all those years of trying had been wasted. The idea that James wasn't strong enough for her hit Sarah harder than she expected. It made her feel like she was somehow holding him back, that their relationship wasn't as strong as she thought. Had she been too demanding, too eager to prove herself? Was she expecting too much from James? But no, she thought firmly it's not about that. I love him and he loves me. That should be enough, shouldn't it? Suddenly, the weight of it all felt overwhelming. Sarah sat down on their bed, her hands trembling. She had spent so much of her time trying to fit into a family that didn't want her, trying to prove herself to a mother-in-law who was never going to accept her. She had never questioned James's loyalty, never wondered if he truly had her back. But now the doubt crept in. She couldn't change the past, and maybe she couldn't change Linda's mind either. But what about James? Could she ever trust him the same way again? Or would this truth, buried so long beneath layers of silence and unspoken feelings. Tear them apart? The silence in the house felt unbearable. Sarah couldn't shake the thoughts swirling in her mind. What she had overheard. The way Linda had spoken so openly about her son and their marriage. It felt like everything was slowly unraveling. She couldn't just let it sit anymore. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she had to confront James, to bring this hidden truth into the open. It was late that evening when Sarah finally decided she couldn't wait any longer. James was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, unaware of the storm building inside her. Sarah stood at the doorway of their living room, heart pounding in her chest. "James, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion she couldn't quite contain. She could feel her pulse in her throat as she watched him turn to look at her, surprised by the sudden seriousness in her tone. "Sure, what's going on?" he asked, setting down the remote control and sitting up a little straighter. "Sit down," she said softly, her hands trembling slightly as she motioned for him to join her. "This is important." James, sensing the tension, moved closer. "Okay, what's wrong?" He sounded concerned, but Sarah could see the edge of nervousness in his eyes. Sarah took a deep breath. "I overheard something today. Something your mother said about you." Her voice faltered, but she quickly gathered her strength. "She said you weren't good enough for me. She said you were too soft and not strong enough for me. And she even said I deserved someone better." James blinked, his face a mixture of surprise and confusion. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. "James," Sarah continued, her heart aching with each word, "why didn't you ever tell me about this? Why didn't you ever stand up for me?" When she said things like that. The room was heavy with silence. James looked down at his hands, clearly struggling to find the right words. He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I didn't think it was necessary to bring it up," he finally admitted, his voice low. "I didn't want to cause tension between you and my mom. She's always been like that, and I guess I just didn't want to add fuel to the fire." Sarah's heart broke a little more with each passing second. "But James, I need you to stand up for me. I can't keep pretending everything is okay when your mom says these things about us. She doesn't just criticize me, she criticizes you, too. And you don't even defend yourself, let alone me." "I know," James said quietly, his eyes meeting hers with a depth of regret. "I know, and I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. I don't know. It's always been easier to ignore it. I didn't want to rock the boat." "Rock the boat?" Sarah's voice trembled with emotion. "James, your mother's words hurt me. But even more, they hurt you. They make me question if you really see me as your equal in this relationship, or if you're just letting her control everything. You've never stood up for us as a family. It feels like I'm fighting alone." James looked pained, his face clouded with guilt. "I never meant for you to feel that way, Sarah. I love you, and I want to protect you. I just didn't know how to do it without upsetting my mom. I've always been caught in the middle." Sarah stood up, pacing slowly across the room. "But, James, I'm your partner. I'm the one you should be protecting. I'm the one who should come first. Your loyalty should be with me, not just trying to please her." He stood up now, too, taking a few steps toward her. "You're right. I should have handled things better. I should have been more honest with you. But I didn't want to hurt you or make things awkward with my mom. But I see now that I was wrong. I don't want you to feel like this anymore." She turned to face him, her eyes full of tears. "I just feel so betrayed, James. I've been trying so hard to fit into your family, to make things work. But now, it feels like I've been a fool. How many times has she said things like this to you, and you've just kept quiet about it?" James ran a hand through his hair, the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. "Too many times," he admitted softly. "I've always known she's critical, but I never knew how much it was affecting you." Sarah looked at him, her heart aching. "I can't keep pretending like everything's fine. We need to talk about this, and we need to figure out how we move forward. Because right now, I don't know if I can trust you the way I did before." There was a long pause. James stepped closer, his voice filled with sincerity. "Sarah, I swear to you, I never wanted to hurt you. I know I've messed up and I'm sorry, but I'm going to fix this. I'll talk to my mom. I'll stand up for you. For us." Sarah's heart softened, but the pain was still there, raw and fresh. I need to see that, James. I need to see that you're not just saying the right things, but actually willing to take action. I will, he said, his voice firm. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Sarah nodded slowly, still unsure but willing to give him a chance. Okay, I'll give you that chance. But things can't go back to the way they were. We need honesty and we need respect. James took her hands in his, squeezing them gently. I promise. No more secrets, no more silence. The days after the confrontation were filled with uncertainty. Sarah tried to go about her routine, working, running errands, doing things she usually enjoyed, but the weight of the conversation with James lingered over her. She didn't know if things would ever be the same again. Her trust in him had been shaken, and the pain of hearing his mother's harsh words still stung. But she also couldn't ignore the sincerity in his eyes when he promised to make things right. James, for his part, seemed just as unsettled. He was doing everything he could to show Sarah that he was committed to repairing their relationship. He had spent hours talking to his mother, trying to explain why his silence had hurt Sarah. He was clear with her, telling Linda that things needed to change, that he could no longer sit back and let her tear at their relationship. It wasn't easy. Sarah could tell from the tense conversations he'd had with her mother that Linda wasn't pleased. But James was determined. One evening, a week after the confrontation, Sarah came home from work to find James sitting on the couch, looking at her with a mixture of relief and anxiety. The moment she walked in, he stood up. Sarah, he said, his voice steady but carrying a deep weight. I talked to her. I told her how I felt, and I told her that I'm not going to let her say those things to you anymore. She didn't take it well, but I made it clear that our marriage comes first, and I'm sorry it took me this long to realize it. Sarah felt a flood of emotions. There was relief, genuine relief, that James had taken the initiative to stand up for her. But there was also a bit of fear. What if Linda didn't accept this? What if things between them got worse? I'm glad you did that, Sarah said softly, her voice a mix of gratitude and apprehension. But do you think she'll actually change? I can't keep living in this tension, James. I need to know that you're really on my side. James nodded, his expression serious. I know, Sarah. I know, and I'm not going to let her control our lives anymore. I'll stand by you, and we'll deal with whatever comes next together. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the confrontation. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the determination to make things right. She knew it would take time to heal, but she realized something important. This was the beginning of something better, not just for them, but for their relationship with Linda as well. A few days later, Linda called. Sarah hesitated when the phone rang, unsure of what to expect. She had steeled herself for a confrontation, for more hurtful words or passive-aggressive remarks. But when she answered, Linda's tone was different, softer, almost apologetic. Sarah, Linda began, her voice careful. I've been thinking a lot about what James said, and I want to apologize. I shouldn't have said the things I did. I never meant to hurt you, but I realize I've been too harsh, and I'm sorry. Sarah was taken aback. This wasn't the apology she had expected. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. She could hear the effort in Linda's voice, the acknowledgement that things needed to change. I appreciate that, Linda, Sarah replied, her voice calm but firm. It means a lot to me that you're acknowledging it. But I want you to know, going forward, I need your respect. We can't move forward if you keep treating me like an outsider in this family. There was a pause on the other end. Then Linda spoke again. I understand. I'll try harder, I promise. I just want what's best for James. And if he's happy with you, then that's what matters most. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe things would get better. After all, she wasn't naive. She knew it would take time for everything to settle, for the old patterns to change. But now, she felt like she had James's full support. He was committed to her and to their marriage, and that was what mattered most. Over the next few months, things slowly started to improve. Sarah and Linda had more honest, open conversations. They didn't always agree, but there was an effort to understand each other. James remained a steady source of support for Sarah, and she saw him make real efforts to create boundaries with his mother. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As time passed, Sarah learned an important lesson. Relationships take work. They take honesty, patience, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But they also take trust that, even when things are difficult, you can rely on each other to get through it. And as Sarah sat next to James one evening, their hands intertwined, she realized that their marriage was stronger than ever. The cracks had been there, yes, but they had mended them together, and that was what mattered. As Sarah looked back on everything that had happened, she realized how much she had learned about herself, her marriage, and the importance of honesty. The painful conversation with James, followed by the hard truth she had heard about his mother, had opened her eyes to the need for open communication and trust in a relationship. It wasn't easy to face those uncomfortable truths, but doing so had brought them closer. In the past, Sarah had tried to ignore the tension with Linda, believing that keeping the peace would make everything better. But now she understood that true peace came from confronting the issues head-on. She had learned that love didn't just mean avoiding conflict. It meant standing up for each other, even when it was hard. James's actions had shown her that, despite his past mistakes, he was willing to change and put their relationship first. His willingness to face his mother and speak honestly with Sarah was a turning point for both of them. While there was still work to be done, Sarah could see a future where they would continue to grow together, honestly, openly, and with mutual respect. As Sarah sat next to James that evening, holding his hand, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The path to healing wasn't quick, but it was real, and for the first time in a long while, she felt confident that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead.